Hi there, my name's Andy Young and I'm one of the automotive lecturers down at Unitech in Auckland, New Zealand, and welcome to my Andy Mechanic YouTube channel. Now, this video is the last of the head inspection videos on the, cylinder head inspection videos on the 1996 Rav4 engine. On this video, I'm going to show you how to check for camshaft end float. Now that end float is when something moves from side to side like this, and it's sat in a lot of bearings and stuff, and it has to have a little bit of end float because things do warm up, and of course without end float it would seize. But too much end float is a bit of a problem, and as things wear you get more, so we need to measure it to make sure that there isn't too much end float on this cylinder head stroke camshaft combination. Now what you do need to do this is to reinstall the camshaft with no valves in place. So there's no valves, there's no lifters, there's no valve springs, there's none of that kind of stuff. It's just the camshaft in the journal, sat in its journals with the caps on and torqued to specification. Sure, the camshaft should still rotate, no problem at all. You can put a dab of oil on the journals if you want, that's your call. I usually build them up dry when I'm just doing an end float check. Doesn't really need lubrication in there for this. All we're doing is moving it side to side very slightly. So I have assembled the intake valve, the intake camshaft into the head of the Rav4, and I've cleaned all the journals up, cleaned all the caps up, cleaned all the bolts up, put them in and torqued them all down to the 19 Newton meter specification. And now I'll show you how to check end float, but you will need to use a DTI gauge. So if you haven't got a DTI gauge, you can't really do this very well. Okay, so DTI gauge with a magnetic base mount, and you also need to have the head, essentially the actual head itself, clamped down onto your bench so it cannot move. So the DTI is then going to get a really accurate reading of that camshaft moving from one side to the other. Okay, right, here goes. Okay, so as you can see, the camshaft is all installed, all the caps are on in the correct positions, and the head, yes, I know you're going to frown at what I've just done there, but it works, is securely clamped down to the bench, which is really important because we're talking about tiny measurements. Now the DTI gauge on its magnetic mount is mounted like that. Now that's really important that you get the mounting of your DTI gauge correct, otherwise you'll get the wrong kind of reading and it won't be right. It'll be ambiguous, it'll give you a false reading and then you won't know what to do. Okay, so I'll set the camera up so that you get a really good view of the DTI gauge itself and the reading that we get. And when you talk about end float, it's the movement of the camshaft from side to side like this. And you'll see that in the video, but you won't see it move very much. You'll probably hear it more than anything else. Okay, moving on. Right, we're all set up. You won't believe how I've held the camera, but anyway. It's pretty impressive stuff. Alright, so now on this particular cam, it's got that nice big gear in the middle of it, so I can move the camshaft forwards and backwards quite easily using the gear. Now that noise is the end float movement, forwards and backwards. So what we'll do is we'll push it all one way and we'll zero the reading. We'll zero the gauge. It's always a bit fiddly. There we go, and then we'll push the cam in the other direction and we'll get a reading. Okay, so we got on there just under 0.05 millimeters, so we can go back to 0. There we go, going the other way and then coming back this way again. Make sure we get the same reading each time. 0.05, well just under, so about 0.045 millimeters. Right, let's see what spec has to say about that. Okay, so we got just under 0.05 millimeters of what we call end float. In actual fact, I'm going to go with a punt and say we had 0.045 because it was about in the middle of the last segment. Now, Mr. Toyota tells us in his manual, and they call it end play in their manual, just to be clear. English people call it end float, end play for Mr. Toyota, and standard measurement is 0.045 millimeters, which is exactly what we got, up to 0.1 of a millimeter. So we're actually on minimum spec. That's really, really good. And it's allowed to go up to a maximum of 0.12. So that's a definite pass on the end float of the intake camshaft. Obviously I need to do exactly the same test on the exhaust camshaft. But the intake camshaft, all good. Okay, so that's how you measure end float of a camshaft. You need one of these. You know, a DTI with a magnetic stand and a decent steel workbench. I have 3 of these workbenches, and they came from an old shipping yard, believe it or not. I paid $100 New Zealand for each one. This is the smallest one, but it's got the thickest top. And they all came with a nice record vise, a number 5 vise on them. How cool is that? $100 each. But the 3 of these benches weigh over a ton. That's over 1,000 kilograms with the vices on. These benches are really, really heavy, but they're really, really good for this kind of job. And for fabrication, you can beat the hell out of something with a hammer and they don't budge. Anyway, that's a different story. So, camshaft end float, you'll need a DTI with a magnetic base. You're going to need a couple of G-clamps to hold the head down to the bench. And, well, you need to know the specifications too, because without the specs, you don't really know what you're dealing with, do you? Okay, hope you found that helpful. That's the last one, and the next batch of videos in the next few days will be all about the block measurements. But I've got to take the block and the gearbox and the transfer box and the front subframe out of the car to separate the block, to do all that kind of stuff, and that's a huge task, and I'm hoping to do that in a couple of days' time. So middle of next week you should start to see some more videos come through. Okay, any questions or comments, do leave them down the bottom and I'll do my very best to get back to you as soon as I possibly can, as always. If you'd like to subscribe to the Andy Mechanic YouTube channel, then please do. It'd be great to have you on board. Click the subscribe button, but also, if you don't mind, press the click on the little gear symbol next to it and activate notifications, and then that way you'll get notifications as and when any new videos go up on the channel, and there's at least 4 or 5 every week, and at the moment 10, 15 videos a week. There's a lot of videos going up. I'm working my ass off for you guys. Okay, well, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Cheers, over and out.